You have almost certainly heard this story. Scientists built a paradise for rodents. Unlimited food, clean water, no predators, no disease. And then every last one of them died. First, the population exploded. There was nothing to stop it, so it doubled and doubled again, and then the whole thing came apart. The animals turned on each other. Mothers stopped caring for their young, and by the end, every single one of them was gone. The lesson everybody took from it was short enough to fit on a poster. Pack enough bodies into one space, and a society eats itself alive. That one experiment has been used to explain crowded cities, falling birth rates, and most of the gloomy predictions about where our species is heading. There's one problem with it. When researchers tried the same thing on actual people, the collapse never showed up. So start with what was really done, because the true version is stranger than the famous one. An animal ecologist named John Calhoun ran a long series of experiments at the National Institute of Mental Health, and his rats lived in a laboratory inside a converted barn. They were safe from disease and from predators, they had food and water and bedding, and they bred about as fast as rats can breed. The one thing they didn't have was space. Picture being in there. Every direction you turn, somebody is already standing in it. You can't pick where to sleep because every corner is taken. You can't decide who to spend the day near. He liked to call the place his rat city, and sometimes his rodent utopia. As the numbers climbed, the animals couldn't stop running into each other, and every one of those meetings was one more thing that had to be handled. In a normal population, an animal under that kind of pressure can simply leave. Inside a sealed pen, there's nowhere to go, so the violence had nowhere to go either, and it spiraled until cannibalism showed up and mothers began killing their own pups. Calhoun gave the whole vortex a name, and he called it a behavioral sink. The animals that survived paid a price that never wore off. They came out asexual and completely withdrawn, clustered together in what he called a vacant, huddled mass. Put them back with ordinary rats and nothing changed, because they stayed alone until they died. He published it in a science magazine in 1962, and it escaped the laboratory almost immediately. You can see why it traveled, because it was a horror story with a graph attached. People were already frightened about overpopulation, and here was a tidy picture of the exact thing they feared, and it even came with an ending. The message that spread was 3 words long: density equals pathology. And almost nobody stopped at rats, because if it was true inside a pen, then surely it was true inside a city. It reached the people who design where the rest of us live. Planners and reformers took the rats as evidence, and they read crowded housing as a machine for producing damaged people. Except somebody went and checked. Researchers started running crowding studies on humans, with real people in real rooms doing ordinary tasks at wildly different densities. The pathologies mostly weren't there. The psychologist Jonathan Friedman found very few of them, because when you put people close together, they largely just get on with it. Whatever was happening inside that barn, it wasn't a simple law about how many bodies fit in a square meter. But a correction never travels the way the original did. The frightening version had pictures and a graph and an ending. The careful version had a room full of people filling in forms and mostly being fine. One of those is a story, the other is a result. So the field pulled the idea into 2 halves, and this next part is the one that actually matters. Density is a measurement. It's people divided by space, and you can write it down on a page. Crowding is a feeling. It's whatever that density is doing to you, and the 2 of them come apart all the time. What decides which one you get isn't the number at all. It's whether you can get privacy, whether you have any control over your own situation, and whether you have a role. Which is why a packed concert can be the best night of your year, while a packed train feels like something being done to you. Same bodies, same space. On the train, you chose none of it. You can end none of it. And for the whole journey, you're nobody in particular. That last one does more work than people expect. A role is not a job title. It is having some reason to be there that the situation recognizes. A crowded kitchen at a party is dense beyond anything a train manages. Nobody minds because everyone in it is doing something. Take the tasks away and leave the same bodies in the same room, and it turns unbearable in about a minute. And you already run this experiment on yourself. Put headphones on and pick the next hour deliberately, and the identical carriage stops feeling like a cage. So the poster version was wrong, but by then it was already everywhere. And here's the part almost nobody tells you. The man who ran the experiment spent years trying to take it back. And it clearly got to him. The version stuck to his name was the short, bleak one, and he said so again and again. His own later work had gone somewhere else entirely, because he stopped counting how many animals there were and started studying the quality of what passed between them. So he redesigned the enclosures themselves, giving the animals better layouts, more ways to get away from each other, and more control over their own space. And he built rodent communities that held together at the same densities that had wrecked the earlier ones. Same number of animals, same square footage, different outcome entirely. Which was the whole argument. If the number were the cause, no redrawing of the walls could have changed anything. It changed everything. Which means the number was never the cage. The cage was having no say in anything, and nowhere of your own to be. He pushed the same idea well past rodents, arguing for things like giving prisoners individual cells. So a person under real pressure still has one door that belongs to them. None of it saved him. His work came to look not merely wrong about people, but actively dangerous. The popular version of what he found grew so much bigger than the finding itself that it buried the far more careful message he was trying to give. One pair of sociologists described what he left behind this way. A red-eyed, sharp-fanged obsession about urban life stalks contemporary thought. You can still hear it today, anytime somebody looks at a crowded city and says that people were never meant to live like this. But that's the rat version of us, and it's the one that fit on a magazine cover. The careful version is harder to print, and it happens to be much better news. What hurts you isn't the crowd. It's having no privacy, no control, and no part to play. You already know this is true, because you can feel all three of those things missing in a room with nobody in it at all. And unlike the number of people standing around you, every one of those three is something that somebody can actually build. That was his whole point in the end. Not that we're doomed by how many of us there are, but that the shape of the space and the roles inside it decide what the crowd does to us. It's a quieter idea than the one that made him famous, and it's also the one he spent the rest of his life on. The story you were told ends with all of them dying in a box. The story he was telling ends somewhere else entirely, because the box was built, and anything built can be built differently.